Hello, Hopper class, and welcome to your science lesson for the last week of half term. You have been working so hard this half term with all of your subjects that I'm really impressed. Now, today's science lesson is going to be more of a review of all the new this half term on plants. So I will share my screen with you because today is going to be a review, and then the next science lesson is going to be your hot task where you need to answer a bunch of questions on what we've learned. So let's review our learning. So our science topic has been about plants. So these are the things that we have been learning about over the last 5 weeks. So identify and name a variety of common wild and garden plants, including deciduous and evergreen trees. So we've been looking at flowers and the different types of trees there are and looking at deciduous and evergreen trees. Identify and describe the basic structure of a variety of common flowering plants. So we looked at the 4 parts of a flower and the 4 parts of a tree. We've looked at where food comes from. So where food that originates from plants, where they have come from. So we looked at the oats and the sugar. And then when you work scientifically, we have been observing closely, perhaps using a magnifying glass. So if you were in school, you would have had a magnifying glass, or if you have one at home. Remember, we looked at the flower and we took apart the petals and we looked at all the different parts. And we were able to identify and group flowers by looking at some flowers that were all the same, like the yellow flowers, some flowers that had similar petals, and then drawing diagrams showing the parts of different plants, including trees. So we've been learning a lot over the last 5 weeks. So what do you know now that you didn't maybe know before? Have a think. What is something that you've learned about this half term? Well, I know lots of you have written that you didn't know before about evergreen and deciduous trees, those 2 new vocabulary words that we've been looking at. And lots of you knew parts of the flower and the parts of the tree, but weren't quite sure about the leaves being used for photosynthesis, getting energy from the sun. So there's lots of things that we've learned over the last 5 weeks. So we're going to review it today, okay? So the first thing we're going to look at, who remembers what are the 5 things a plant needs to grow? So we learned about that at the beginning when we were talking about planting our beanstalk. So what are those 5 things? Can you remember? Did you get them all? So let's have a look. Did you remember that it needs air? So it can't be hidden away in a cupboard. It needs to be out in the air. It needs sun. So the sunlight is what gives the plant the energy. So we have the leaves that use the energy from the sun to make food, to make energy. And it needs water, of course. The water we get goes up through the roots, right, up into the stem, into the leaves, and the water carries nutrients as well. What else does it need? Well done. It needs soil. So it needs to have that soil so the roots can make a base to help it stand up so it doesn't fall over. And it needs space. When I put my 2 beans really close together in that jar, their roots were all tangled together. And one of those beans didn't grow. And that was probably because the roots didn't have space. So it needs air, sun, water, soil, and space. Okay, so those are the 5 things. Do you remember learning about that at the very beginning? Those are the 5 things that we needed to learn about to make a plant grow. Okay, let's see. Can I name the parts of a plant? Let's see what you remembered. Okay, so these are the petals, and lots of petals make a flower, and they attract bees and insects. Did you remember that? Do you remember that when you have your flower, it's bright, lots of bright colors, so the bees and the butterflies all come and they attract it, and then they get the pollen and they're able to spread it around. What's the next part of our flower? Maybe the leaves? Do you say to take the leaves? What do the leaves do? Do you remember what the leaves do on our flower? Well done. If you said, yeah, the leaves, they take in the sunshine, right, to help make food for the plant. And what's the long thing down the middle of our flower? Well done. It's the stem. What does the stem do? Do you remember? Well done. It helps the flower to stand up straight so the petals and the leaves can get closer to the sun. And also, it brings up all that water and nutrients from the roots. So the stem holds the flower up and it moves the water from the roots up to the leaves. And the last, we have the roots. So the roots find the water and the food in the soil, and it helps it to stand up and to bring all that up to the rest of the flower to make it grow. So you remember those parts of the flower: petal, leaf, stem, and roots. Okay, well done. Now, what type of tree keeps its leaves all year? Can you remember? What type of tree keeps its leaves all year? Well done if you said evergreen, that's right. So an evergreen tree keeps their leaves all year round. So we've got pine tree, fir tree, like Christmas trees. An evergreen tree is green, and you can remember that by evergreen. Okay. Ooh, what type of tree loses its leaves during the year? So when I look out now in winter, I can see some trees that don't have any leaves. They're very bare. What are those called? Do you remember? Can I hear you? That's right, deciduous. So deciduous trees lose their leaves in the winter. So we've got birch, which have the white bark. We've got oak trees, which have the acorns, and then we have horse chestnuts, which have the conkers. So deciduous trees lose their leaves. Well done. Now, what similarities and differences do you notice about different types of leaves? Can you remember what is interesting about an evergreen tree leaf? What does it look like? Can you remember? Well done if you said it's usually needles. So you have pine needles on a pine tree and fir needles on a fir tree, which are like Christmas trees. So if I look here, we have an oak leaf. Now an oak leaf is round, it's quite big, and it's got round edges, whereas the pine has pine needles. And do you know what else grows on a pine tree? Well done if you said pine cones, that's right. And you can see lots of pine cones in the autumn. And then we have the horse chestnut, which is what the conkers come from. And those leaves are a single stem with 5 leaves around it. And then we've got the fir trees. So remember that, the oak leaf, remember what that looks like? It's big and it's curvy. And then you have the pine and the fir, which have the needles. Okay, now, what plants do we eat? Can you remember that? That was just last week. And did you watch Mrs. Savage make flapjacks? Well, I ate a lot of those. But what plants do we eat? Can you remember? Can you think of some fruit plants that we eat? Let me hear you shout them out. Strawberries, grapes, berries, bananas, oranges. That's right. Can you think of any vegetables that we eat? Because vegetables are a plant. What vegetables do we eat? Yes, that's right. Fantastic. There are lots of vegetables. So we have beans and pumpkins and carrots, and I call them zucchini, you call them aubergines. Yes, there are lots and lots of vegetables that we eat, and they're all from plants. Now, do you remember those 2 ingredients we learned about from the flapjacks? What were the 2 ingredients we learned about that came from plants? Well done if you had said the oats and the sugar. That's right. So the sugar came from the sugarcane plant and the oats came from the oats. There they are. And yeah, strawberries, beans. So we eat a lot of plants. So we eat a lot of plants. So you can remember that. And I know that when on Tapestry, a lot of you showed pictures of bread, because bread comes from a plant. What plant does bread come from? Well done if you said wheat. Yeah, so bread, you get the wheat, you have to grind it up to make flour, and flour is from wheat, so it's a plant. So there's lots and lots of food that we eat out there that are plants. Now, I'm going to show you some flowers. Can we remember what they're called? So let's look here. Who remembers what these are called? Daffodils, and this is the one that has a really nice smell. Lavender. So we have daffodils and lavender. What about here? What are these called? tulips. And remember that one, the yellow one with the 5 rounded petals? A buttercup. Well done. What about these ones? What do we have here? Sunflower, and this one, it's a rose. That's right, they smell lovely. Ooh, what about this one? Have a look at the shape. What color is it? What does it look like? It's blue and it looks like a bell, a blue bell. What about this one here? It's red. Where do I remember seeing red flowers? Remembrance Day. So they are a poppy. And then we have these little tiny white ones with the yellow there, daisy. And this weed, that is a dandelion. Well done. So next science lesson is going to be our hot task. So you will need to use all the knowledge that we have learned this half term and answer some questions. So if there's anything from this video that we've just talked about that you don't quite remember, go back and watch it again, because tomorrow's science lesson, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions and you have to remember and write down all the answers for me without getting any help. Okay, so try your best. Remember, look at the video again if you need some help, and enjoy remembering all the amazing things we've learned about plants this half term. Bye.